It's all about the policies again. And when you're in a crunch situation with one of your renters, it's not personal, even though it might feel that way. There is always a bad guy. You're the good guy. They're the good guy. The bad guy is the policies.
Welcome to the Good Stewards Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to seasoned real estate investors who want to maximize the cash flow potential in their business. We are buy and hold investors with 1,000+ properties and markets across the U.S. who bring an insider's view into the nitty-gritty details of real estate investing. If you're looking to develop the mindset, teams, and systems that can dramatically build your real estate business and net worth, you're in the right place.
Welcome to this episode of the Good Stewards Podcast. I'm Ryan Dossie.
I'm Amanda Perkins.
And I'm Bill Sirius.
And I'm Andrew Sirius.
Welcome to the Good Stewards Podcast. We're really glad that you've joined us today. We're going to be talking about an important subject, particularly if you're a BRRRR investor. That's BRRRR, which is primarily what we do. And if you remember, the B is buy, the first R is rehab, the second is rent, and then refinance and repeat. We're going to be talking about the second R, the renting part of BRRRR. You know, it's been said many, many times, you make your money when you buy. And I think all of us have found that to be true, because if you don't get a good deal, it's not going to turn out all that well in the end. You have to buy something at wholesale. But while that mantra is very true about the B of BRRRR, the second R is critical because you retain your value when you rent well. And that is the point of what you're trying to do in a buy and hold strategy, is use other people's money to finance the property, but also use other people's money to pay off over time the cost of that property in mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, you name it. So if nothing else, you really appreciate the folks that you're renting to, because they're the ones who are going to lead you down the path of becoming well off in real estate. They're the folks paying the bill. Now, when you think about who you're going to rent to, that is really important, because think about when you interview somebody for a job. Maybe you've done that maybe more than once. That person's going to put their best foot forward when they're there in the interview process, right? And your job as an interviewer is to find the reason you shouldn't hire them. And you're going to have to dig deep sometime, because they're going to come off very pleasant, very accomplished. Everything looks really good. How about when you're dating somebody? Isn't that the same situation? They're going to, particularly the first few dates, they're going to try to come off as well as possible. Your job, again, is to look for, well, at least if you're looking for a long-term relationship, is to look for why you might not want to continue that relationship. And the same holds true with when you are looking for a person moving into your property, that you hope that they treat it just like you would treat that property over time. Because again, you're trying to retain your value as a BRRRR investor. Now, I bet we've had some interesting experiences among our Good Stewards group here, and I'm sure you would have them if you were with us. You could share some very interesting experiences too. But maybe I'll turn it over to whoever would like to share some of what they've experienced in terms of the second R of BRRRR.
Well, one thing that we always do is, I just want to chime in and say, don't discount people and be violating any sort of fair housing laws in your area. Those can be national, state, and local to your area. So be careful when you're discounting people, that you're not making judgments against them that aren't allowed. But one of the critical things that that is allowed is evaluating, it's like if they qualify, they make enough money, but what's their past rental history like? That's really going to tell you, how did they treat their last property? And, that's something you don't want to skip over. It's just the same, like you said, with a job interviewee. What was their past relationship with their old employer? How did they leave their last rental? Did they leave a big balance? Because if they did that to somebody else, they'll probably do it to you. Did they take good care of their property? It's a pretty good indication that they'll take care of yours. So, that's just a given that's something that you're going to want to be looking for when you're looking to put somebody into one of your houses.
You also want to make sure that you have criteria in place. I'm sure we've all seen like the big apartment signs that are pretty much like, if you have a heartbeat and $200, you can move in tomorrow. That is not how you should be running your business. If you own your own company, if you've ever acted in any sort of a management role and you've ever hired out of need, that typically does not go very well. So a lot of the times when you're screening for potential residents, we've had properties that we've let sit empty for an extra month just to make sure we had somebody in there that we thought, they're really going to take good care of this place, not just a heartbeat.
The cost of a bad resident is far, far more than the cost of a vacant property. But I would say you want to just create this this goes throughout your entire business, but just create a system and just basically a funnel where you're marketing your properties in a certain way, and people are coming in and they're getting the same general spiel, and then you're screening them for the exact same criteria. This is a good way to protect you against any sort of discrimination lawsuit. Just quickly, I think there are 7 national categories. I think it's race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, and familial status. Those 7 things. And then some states have some additional things. But those just put to the side, of course, like you should. And we mainly look at, like, for ourselves here, we require 3 times the rent and income. We require no felonies unless it's so far back that it doesn't show up on your record, which is usually over 7 years. We make the exception for a DUI. We'll accept one of those if it's over a year old, and then we don't or too many more than one misdemeanor kind of thing, and no evictions. If it's kind of one of those, it's usually not that hard to avoid an eviction because most landlords will let you leave prior to the eviction if you just agree with them to leave. They'd rather do that than actually have to pay all the eviction costs. So if you've gone through the eviction process once, it's likely you're willing to go through it again, especially if it was only a year or 2 ago and not 10 years ago.
Eviction typically means they're feisty.
Yeah. Or just unwilling to talk to you, unwilling to do anything, and just don't really care that much.
Well, and I will say, again, pay attention to your local laws because there's some legislation coming down, like, for instance, in Oregon, that we're not going to be able to, if people have had evictions that I think are more than 2 or 3 years old, that's not something that can pre-qualify them, as that they don't meet our criteria. We have to accept that. Also, we have to loosen our felony restrictions. And, so
and
again,
there's the axe murderer law going on, right? Where it's like you can't discriminate against axe murderers.
And so that's the other thing that you want to think about. Is this something that you're going to do for yourself? In our, globally in our company, we feel we are the best managers of our own properties. But maybe this isn't something you want to dive into, in which case you want to hire a property management company to deal with that sort of headache. Be careful. Interview property management companies. Our kind of mantra is nobody's going to care about your properties as much as you do. And so that's why we've chosen to set up property management wherever we go. But maybe that's not something that you're able to do until you get enough properties under your belt that you can hire somebody to do it for you, or maybe you can do it for yourself, but maybe it takes away from your ability to acquire properties, that sort of thing. So it's, you have to decide what's the best for yourself.
Andrew, you previously mentioned building a pipeline for potential residents to kind of come into the funnel to view properties, screening, et cetera. We've kind of talked about what we're looking for. Why don't you dive into how we're finding these people?
First of all, there's no pipeline if there's a funnel. There's just a funnel, okay? Secondly, at the first point, I think every part of your business should be, as I said, systematized. And basically, I would actually recommend just writing it down. What is the process? So, like for us, when we finish a turnover, we go out and depends on where you take the process, but go through everything that was supposed to be done, make sure it was all done. Anything that was left to be done, demand the contractor come out and do it before they get paid. Get that done, get it cleaned. And then basically write up a quick amenities list if it's a new property. So this would be like, how many bedrooms, how many baths? Does it have a master bedroom? Does it have a bay window? Does it have a bidet? This is a key point that you're going to want to highlight if it does have a bidet. Things like that. Anything that you can put into your advertising, and you can just keep on file for the next time it comes up, and etc.
And make sure you note things like what kind of utilities there, like electric and gas, no gas, that kind of thing, and what kind of heating and cooling system it has. Those kinds of things, make a note of, keep it. We have a system that in our property management database that we can keep all of that stuff for. But you don't want to have to be pulling all that stuff from your head. So it's a good way to, keep it all together so that when those questions come up.
And if it's apartment, who's the utility is going to be on? Is it going to be on the resident, or is it going to be on you? Is the resident going to pay the water, sewer, and trash, and you're going to pay the electric and gas or something like that? You should know that going up front when you put your ad together, because especially if you're offering something like all bills paid, where you're going to pay all the utilities, you want to make a big deal out of that, because you're going to be charging higher rent, or if you're not, you're going to lose money. So
and what's incredibly important is photos, because the first introduction that a resident is going to have to your property is the photo and seeing it, because most people are shopping online. They're not going to go out to the property and then look at another one and another one. They're going to look online. So having really good photos, if you don't know what good photos look like, go to airbnb.com, and generally those are very good photos. The more you can make them kind of elongated rather than squarish, because that makes things feel larger, feel more expansive, the better off. You're going to put those photos on your website if you have one, which we'd really encourage over time to build one. If you're going to do your own property management, you need to have a website. That's where you want to funnel people into initially to look at the property, and then also to come up to speed with things like your rental application. Doing rental applications online is like the thing to do now. So is there an easy way for them to apply for the property? Do you have, are you going to charge them a rental fee to do so? In some of our markets we do, and some of our markets we don't charge a rental fee.
You should almost always charge rental application fees, unless you're doing like student rentals or something like that. That's a little off, in my opinion. I would make, we once stopped charging them as a marketing gimmick of sorts, and I have never seen such long lists of felonies in my entire life that is like, why did you apply? Oh wait, there's no reason not to. I would say with the pictures thing, like we had a leasing agent that was taking pictures directly straight onto the property, and they just look so tiny when you take it right in front of it, just straight at no angle whatsoever. I lambasted him for that. You want to take your front picture of the property at about a 45 to 90 degree angle, or a 40, I'd say 30 to 45 degree angle to make it look bigger. You want your pictures to big, open, and bright. And so all the lights are on. Make sure it's clean. Don't take a picture of the counter and 3 cabinets and the stove. It should be the entire kitchen. Things like that.
Get out of your car to take the pictures. The amount of times I've seen it's like raining, the windows up, and it's like that's the only picture the person has. If you have like a newer iPhone, that's probably good enough. But if you're rocking like a Nokia, walkie-talkie contractor phone, it's probably not going to look great.
Yeah, three-dimensional is, I think, a good way to think in your mind when you're taking angled photos. Does it look three-dimensional, as most of us would look at a property, or the exterior or the interior for that matter?
Well, and the other thing is, like, when you buy, this is a little bit of a different thing, but when you buy the property, you kind of have an idea of what you thought you were going to get for rent. When you go to rent the property, go look at the market, but also compare your properties with other properties. We're oftentimes putting something just a little bit nicer out there on the market. We can get a premium for that, and that maximizes what we can get out of our property to, help us pay our bills more.
Yeah. Also, take the picture in the middle of the day. Do not take a picture at night, or with the sun going. I've seen this before, where the property's like dark and it looks like the apocalypse is about to start. People don't want to rent that. So, lots of little things in that respect. I mean, there are even new technologies coming out where you can get like 3D, like surround, like those. What are those images that surround? You can just look all the way around.
360 kind of thing.
360 view, and then like moves to the next room, and then it takes another 360. It's just like, I don't think that's necessary, but I do think, as you said, Dad, I don't think I'll call you Dad, not Bill. I think
Thank
you. As you said, pictures are the most important thing for your marketing, and just clearly what you're offering, make all the details known. Most people won't actually look that much past the price. Other than pets, we should mention this briefly. With houses, especially, we highly recommend allowing pets. Charge pet rent. We usually charge $25 a month per pet, up to 3. No dangerous breeds of dogs. We're not allowing pit bulls and things like that. And a non-refundable pet deposit, usually about $250. But this probably mostly just pays for the damage pets do. Dogs do a little bit more damage. Cats do less. But Americans love their pets in particular, and you just open your property up to a lot more people, and more demand means higher price. So
once you identify that right resident and they meet your criteria, the next thing you're going to do is make sure you have a really solid written rental agreement that spells everything out. We schedule as much as we can in person to sign leasing agreements, just so that we can go through and kind of set things up for the process. And, that's one of the things that's going to allow you to collect all of the rent that you want. You're going to want to lay those out, and, having your property in as good of shape. And that's why, like Andrew talked about going through and checking all the systems. The feel of that move-in process for your resident, you want it to be good. You don't want them to move into a property and then have a bunch of broken stuff. You want to start with a good first impression. It's inevitable that oftentimes there'll be, maybe especially if you bought a big rehab, nobody's lived in it before, the first person in there, maybe you didn't check everything. But if there's an immediate move-in repairs, address them early, address them immediately, have good communication with your resident. It just starts everything off on a good foot.
Yeah, that first meeting is really important, because when you think about a teacher's first day at school, usually she's kind of laying down the law and what her expectations are, what the policies are going to be put into place for how that classroom is going to operate. And in a sense, without being mean or nasty or kind of ugly about anything, you should be kind of laying down the law in that first meeting, because you have rental policies, and it's not about you, it's not about them, it's really about the relationship that they have to the rental policies that are in place.
It's setting proper expectations.
There you go.
Both ways. Yeah. And, if something isn't met, for instance, people do fall on hard times, or maybe they didn't make paying rent a priority. Treat it like a business. Treat everyone the same thing. Issue your 72-hour notices timely. Process for evictions quickly. Don't give, it's okay. Maybe once, maybe you'll give people a one-off on, maybe as long as you're consistent with it, maybe they get a one free, waive the late payment, that sort of thing. But one thing that I've learned, and I don't want to be too negative about this, but I've never been lied to as many times as I was when I was a property manager. People don't want, it's having a place to live is a really important thing for them. So they're going to tell you whatever they can, and to try to just draw that time out a little bit. I'm not saying don't ever believe everyone or anyone, or that everyone's bad, but be strict. Make that rental agreement stick. Don't be breaking the rules all the time, because then they just sort of kind of always expect a break. And the way for you to maximize your income potential is to always be collecting rent on your property. And if somebody's moved in and they're not paying, they need to move someplace else, and you need to get somebody else in.
I think the lesson of this entire show is to just always believe the worst of everybody and be a complete cynic at all times.
I didn't want to say that.
And you'll go far as a
let me
property
mention
manager.
that one of our partners right now has a loan or a rental balance on one property they rent for about $950 of $2,780. They just listen too often to this story or that story or another, and instead of operating on the basis of their policies that are in place, and one of those policies is that they will make a deal one time about late rent, and when that late rent date is set between a resident and themselves, they have to keep that date. They can't come up with another story that elongates the time at that point. People as one friend of mine has said, have gotten used to living indoors. And so they need, if that's what they want to do, they need to make rent a huge priority in their life above everything else if they want to live indoors. So our friend, partner who kind of let this slip, and we've all done that. I've been there. I bet you every one of us have been there because we are human and we do appreciate it.
And
people
you
do
want to
fall on hard
believe
times.
the best of people, and you don't want to be so cynical, but
it's all about the policies again. And when you're in a crunch situation with one of your renters, it's not personal. It's not, even though it might feel that way. And there is always a bad guy. You're the good guy. They're the good guy. The bad guy is the policies. The bad guy is the eviction notice. The bad guy is the law of the land. The bad guy is that the bank account is empty because, so something other than you two are the bad guy, but you have to adhere to the policies that are in place. And I'm sorry, I wish I could do different. I wish I could change it, but I just can't. I always have to issue a 72-hour notice on the 5th day of the month when rent is now late. And I always have to follow through on the eviction unless we put something, on and on and on. It's all about the policies, and that's what we both adhere to.
My brother Philip is kind of the master of this, and I mean you can use all these things like fair, like it would be illegal to do that because of fair housing. Like you're not allowed to treat, and this is both good for policy wise, but it's actually good explanation. I'm not allowed to treat one resident, in a way that I'm not treating another. I'm not allowed to give you a deal that I wouldn't be willing to offer others. And so, always, we kind of see it as either the law, the policy, the lease, basically what's in the lease, the rules of the lease, or just the situation itself. Something bad happened. It's the past. And that's the problem. But the manager, as the manager, you're working to find the best solution possible with the resident. And that's not what they want. The best solution is not what they want necessarily. Well, it's almost never what they want because they usually want to, not
stay
pay
for
their
free.
rent. Yeah, but it's the best situation given what the situation is and what your rules and policies are, and that's why having that set up front is so important.
I heard our gal on the phone the other day working on a collection. We had somebody that we worked with a payment plan on, like Bill mentioned. We'll work with a resident once in a year and set a payment arrangement, and the girl missed the date. So she called her with kind of a, hey, this needs to get paid or you need to get out. And the girl hits her with, oh, I'm so sorry, my son got shot. And our gal doesn't skip a beat, just says, well, I didn't get shot last month too, did he? It's like,
that's brutal.
That might be a little overly harsh.
So I don't know what happened with that, but I thought that was great.
Bet she didn't pay her rent.
No, I don't think she did. So I want to touch on kind of a big paradigm shift I had when I first kind of joined the Good Stewards family. And that's, if you've noticed, we don't call ourselves landlords and we don't call the people who rent from us tenants. We call them residents. And I've heard Bill describe it as, a tenant is what the court calls somebody when they're getting evicted, and somebody who we're fortunate enough to have paying our mortgages for us as a resident. They're not a tenant. So, in real estate investing, we're positioned where, we can make a lot of money. We can provide good, clean, affordable housing, and we can provide people with a good experience. And that, I think, ultimately comes down to viewing the people that are renting from you as your equals. These are human beings. You're not somehow superior to them. I think there's a danger in real estate investing of, we've all had unfortunate stories, which I think we're going to share a few with residents, but there's kind of this danger of treating it as like, oh gosh, tenants are just the absolute worst. And I've even seen a guy who will live stream his evictions of families sobbing as they're throwing their stuff out onto the yard. And it's like, what? So, I think it comes down to operate from a position of integrity, treat people well, stick to your rules, and property management really isn't that difficult if you're doing that and setting proper expectations.
Yeah, I think that's really important. As a matter of fact, if you if you're just starting out, it's pretty easy to take on the word residents, or you could call them renters or customers, clients. In business, it's the clients, it's the customers who pay the fare, and we are customer centric. But if you've got an office now and you've been doing this for a while, it might be hard to transition from that one word tenant to the word resident. We the folks in Kansas City in their office, kind of fun. They put $100 in a jar, and you could do this with taking out ones or fives or tens. I'd probably take out a 10, put it in tens. Every time somebody says the word tenant, you take money out. Every time they say resident, just keeps the money in, and you do it for a week. And at the end of the week, everybody has their name in a bowl, and whoever is picked out of the bowl gets to keep the rest of the money that's left. Not a bad way to get your office acclimated to using a different term.
Off the T word.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, you can do that. And it's really not about the word. It's about the attitude, as Ryan talked about earlier. How are we treating these folks who are paying every single dime, hopefully, of the cost of our property? And, even when I was texting our partner about, giving an update regarding that $2,780, it was the hardest thing I could do to call that person a resident who owed us that much money. I did not want to call them a resident, but in fact, I forced myself to use the R word as I feel like I should, because that's who they are to us, even though they owe us a bunch of money and are probably going to leave with a big bill in hand. So that's when it gets challenging, or when the property gets really thrashed, to still think about these folks in those terms. But it's just, we're carrying on a long-term business here. We're being customer centric, and we're just going to, carry on like they're our friends, even though we have a business relationship with them.
I know we talked about that we were going to share like horror stories, but I think there's enough of those. What do you guys think about sharing a story of one of your tenants that was just kind of a neat or unique situation?
What did you say? I think we just took a $10 bill out of the bowl.
No pizza party for us in the Indy office.
No, for you. I mean,
that's fair. The rest of my staff may win it. Okay, so for me, I still think one of the coolest things that I've gotten to experience in real estate investing was the first family that I ended up leasing to as my very first property. And the son-in-law was on the lease, and had literally brought his family over from Venezuela, his mom and dad. So these were people that were like brand new to the country. They'd never owned a house. They'd never had a house that they could even call their own. And it was a really neat experience to be a part of, like them celebrating the fact that they passed their citizenship. They were like sobbing as we were signing the lease. It was just a really cool experience to be a part of. Does anybody else have any fun ones?
Got some horror ones.
That would be a no.
All right.
No,
I'm also the newest
true.
to this.
We have residents that actually bring gifts into the office. We do a really good job of taking care of our properties and doing, we do inspections annually. On some of our college stuff, it's more like quarterly, just to keep on top of things. We have a lot of campus housing, and sometimes those residents are a little tougher on our properties than others, but
your smoke detectors never get tampered with there in Eugene, do they?
Just keeping up with that maintenance and responding to things, and keeping the lines of communication open. People bring cookies into the office to our property manager, and flowers and that sort of thing. So, we have a lot of good, positive resident stories.
And when you have those, I would really encourage folks to give you a Google review, probably that and Yelp, but I would expect Google is what people look at more often when they're looking up your website or your company.
Well, right, especially because property management sites collectively, and if that's what your website is, are people that people are going to complain if they didn't get all of their money back on a security deposit. And even if it's 100% legitimate, you might have reviews out there that you can't do anything about. So it's good to promote people to go and do the positive review, because not everybody's thinking about always doing a positive review. Usually they're like, well, if they left on bad terms, they're going to smear your name and drag you through the mud because they're angry. So it's good to encourage people to.
And a real good time to do that is at lease renewal. When folks are in your office, go ahead and have them just slide over your laptop and say, I'd really appreciate if you could if you've had a good experience, could you leave us a review here? So that's a time to do it, and it'll make a difference with people just looking. Again, they're going to look at your photos first, but they're going to want to know those people who are vetting you as a property management company or as the folks that they're going to be relating to, having
people
the property,
read that. They want to know, what are you going to be like, when something breaks? Are you going to take care of them, or is it going to be something where, they're going to be without hot water for 2 months,
And you should respond to the bad ones, because they're going to look at your star rating, like and the last couple. But if your star rating is decent, like if you're in the 3, most property management companies have really bad ones too. So if you're
in like the 3s, you're like,
doing okay.
You're doing good.
You're doing okay. But you should respond to all the bad ones very, very professionally. Yep. And if they see there's a couple bad ones here and there, not defensively, very professionally.
Don't just
don't insult
they
them.
were an idiot who never paid their rent.
Yeah. You don't want to sink down. You want to come off as the cool-headed one if there's ever an argument between two people, if one person is screaming at the other and the other person is just like smirking and like just kind of, maybe not that, but like if they're talking rationally or they start laughing at the other person, you're always going to take the person who's calm versus the person who's losing their mind. So you want to be in the written form of that, the calm one.
So
most people can read.
Any last takeaways here, and I'll just start with one, and that is that maintenance is the best form of resident retention. So if you are maintaining your properties well and you're responding quickly to things like the hot water heaters not operating, then you're gonna have happy customers. If you're dragging things out, getting to them in a timely fashion, people are going to get pretty frustrated with that. And we realize how everything breaks on the weekend, doesn't it? Everything breaks, on Sunday morning kind of thing. So you need to have some things in place for emergency maintenance. They need to know exactly how to get a hold of somebody who can deal with their problem, particularly over the weekends and at nights. Figure that out. Make sure that's in place. It's one of your parts of your system. Are there any other takeaways that we should? Be
consistent. Treat your property management like a business. People always say too, don't rent to friends and family. Really don't. I mean, that's not, you're not going to maximize your profits by minimizing the amount of money that you're able to make on them. So that sort of thing.
Or employees. I'm going to take that as my point. You can come up with another one.
All right, I'll come up with something different. Go ahead.
Don't rent to employees either. We've had only bad experiences with that. Several of the horror stories that that Ryan didn't want to hear about.
That's right.
Could be traced back to that. And it's just it mixes things up. And if you ever have to let that person go or jack their rent up, it's not. Yeah, it's a little awkward.
Why can't you pay your rent? Well, I know why you can't pay your rent.
And if they're mad at you, they might take it out on your property. So.
The walls. So I think my takeaway, we touched on it briefly, and that was dangerous dog breeds. Watch out for the careful ways that people phrase this. A Staffordshire Terrier is a pit bull. Watch out for there's some like, oh, he's just a mutt. It was a rescue. And it's like, oh, it's pit bull and a Rottweiler mutt. So do a little bit of background there. And then on the same note of not violating any laws, make sure you understand how, like service animals work and what you can and can't decline for. Because, you can get into some kind of sticky situations there. I think that's actually one of the biggest questions I typically see is like, can a pit bull be an ESA? And is an emotional support animal the same as a service animal? Yada, yada. So just make sure you're familiar with your state laws with regards to that.
I'll bet you guys have a bunch of other questions, a bunch of other experiences, and we would like to hear about them. So why don't you find us on thegoodstewards.com. Please leave your comments, put your likes, put your questions. We'd like to keep this topic rolling along with the others. It's really important. Again, you make your money when you buy, but you retain your money when you rent well. So we'll sign off for now and see you next week.